before we start, I got a little bit of advertising this week, kids. If you'd like to advertise, hit me up at talkinschmit@gmail.com. All right, kids, check this out. We got a new book called Trim Camp from AE Gold. Trim Camp is a tall tale about a group of pro skateboarders who decided to trim weed. From a pool skating orgy to a kung fu challenge, the drama never stops. Even the Super Trooper escapade couldn't dampen the stoke of playing a poker tournament on acid. This was one for the record books. Definitely a best read when you're hella high. Ryan Clement said he learned a lot about how the weed world works from reading this book. Mickey Reyes said he gave his copy to Cardiel. Joey Terche exclaimed, lies, all fucking lies. Imagine having the munchies of reading. That's right, kids. Trim Camp. Get your copy of Trim Camp today. Artwork by Connor Getzlaff.
Hey, it's Corey at Blue Plate, 3218 Mission Street. Come see us. Meatloaf, fried chicken, deviled eggs, Dollar Olympia beers. We're here every day of the week. We got a garden and we got smiles on our faces. Come let us make you happy.
This is Sammy Town from Fang, and you're listening to Talkin Schmit.
It's cool, like tonight is the night.
Here we go again.
Just give it the old college turn.
Big dog's in.
Schmitty.
96 times, Schmitty.
Thanks, Schmitty.
We on? Schmitty?
Talkin Schmit.
That's called go to the hospital, bitch.
I'd be shitting my pants.
Your Rolodex is fucking deep.
It's about the one.
Who is this guy thinks he's tough shit?
What's up? We're tastemakers.
Come on, Schmitty, what the fuck?
Let's hear it for Jake Phelps. Yeah!
All right, fuck. Last year was rough. We know that. One of the many shitty things that happened to me was finding out that after I did a lengthy interview with my following guest, I was super pleased with, I came to find out that the file got corrupt and was not salvageable. I sent out the huge apology, basically said anytime, anywhere, I'm available for the rebate. And here we are. Really appreciate giving the second opportunity. There's the lead singer of the legendary Bay Area punk band Fang. They call him Sammy Town. Welcome to Talkin Schmit Part 2.
Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Fuck, I felt so... It was perfect, though, for 2020 wise. It was just like, oh, another... Yep.
No doubt. Yeah, I know anything that happens right now is... it's just par for the course, you know?
Yeah. How have you guys, you're in Arizona still, right?
Yeah. Still in Tucson. Tucson is, we moved here during the pandemic, so I don't even know what it's like normally.
Right.
You know, and so it'll be interesting as the vaccine gets, disseminated across the United States and things hopefully go back to normal. We'll get to actually experience Tucson and see what it's really like.
Yeah, so it's a trip down there. It's kind of a college town. Yeah, they have. What is it? UC Arizona or Arizona State?
University of Arizona, I think.
Yeah.
And then Phoenix has
Arizona State.
Arizona State.
Uh-huh.
Phoenix is the party college,
Yeah.
and Tucson is, I think, the more serious academic, school.
Right. Let's start with the early days. Where were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in the East Bay. My dad, when I was a little kid, we lived in Berkeley. My dad was going to UC Berkeley. And so I grew up, we moved for like a year. We moved to Iowa for a year when I was a little kid. But after he graduated UC Berkeley, he came back a year later and got a job. And he taught at UC Berkeley. I mean, he's retired now. He's still alive, but he taught there for, 40 years or a long time.
Were you actually born in Berkeley then, or?
I was born at Alta-Bates Hospital on Ashby Avenue in Berkeley.
Oh, wow. Damn. Okay, cool. What's your birth sign?
I'm a Taurus.
Taurus, do you believe in that stuff?
I don't know. I mean, it's, sometimes sometimes I used to read it. I guess I think it's entertainment. It's funny. Some of it I guess applies. I'm certainly stubborn. And that part is absolutely true.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's just a coincidence.
No, same. I've been finding a lot of similarities. The older I get, I'm like, your authentic self comes out, and you're like, maybe I am a little bit. But do you remember what your first record was? Did you?
The first record I ever bought.
Yeah.
The first record I ever bought was Elton John's. My cat is trying to attack the keyboard from behind, so if something goes wrong. Elton John. It's Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy by Elton John. That, and right around the same time, I bought. I used to go to a lot of movies when I was a kid. That was before I started like running amok. We would, me and friends would go to the movies all the time, like every weekend. And so I got the soundtrack to Star Wars, was also one of my first records, because I got it. I got that when it came out. I think I went and saw that movie about 10 times in the theater. And so
the original.
Yeah, when it came out.
Oh, sick. Did you get into the other ones too? Have you seen all of them? Do you have it?
Oh yeah, I've seen all of them. I'm not like a Star Wars, like huge fan, but I've definitely seen all the movies. I haven't watched like The Mandalorian or anything that is an offshoot of that. I'm not, but I'll watch all. Like if another Star Wars movie came out, I would go see it, because at least when I was a kid, it was a big deal. It was like that first movie was it was epic. It was like Hero with 1,000 Faces. It had all the great elements of all the archetypes were really well done. And like I said, we went to the movies a lot. It was me and Jimmy Thiebaud and another friend of ours, this girl, I'm trying to remember her name. But we would spend most weekends going to the movies,
Wait, did you grow up with Jim Thiebaud?
Yeah, we became best friends in the 4th grade.
Wow.
And so
wow.
I call him Jimmy. Nobody calls him Jimmy.
Oh, Jake used to call him Jimmy Rancid.
Yeah. But I call him Jimmy because that's what everybody called him back then. But I don't know. We ended up in the same class in the 4th grade. And then that's when we started hanging out, and we started skating together, and we were real close till I started running. Like I hit 9th grade. We were freshmen in high school together, and I really rarely went to school, and Jimmy stayed in school, and he really we'd been skating together. I think we got banana boards in the 4th grade, maybe the 5th. We started skating, and our pig boards came out, and like I made my own pig board, and we there was a place up in Berkeley called A Lot of Flex Skateboards, and they made their own trucks, Blades trucks back then, and it was skating was an underground culture, very tied into punk rock. Like if you skated back then, you listened to punk rock, and if you were a punk rocker back then, you had a skateboard.
Sure.
And but Jimmy, he got obviously very good. He really, really focused on skating, and he became obviously a incredible skater.
Right.
And I went off. I always had a side of me that was attracted to crime, and I started doing hustles pretty pretty early on. You know, there was a kid in school that had been flunked a couple times, and I was his pigeon. We would get on the 72 bus. Well, he would get on the bus and he'd play, you know, 3-card money. And he was a much bigger kid, you know, because he'd flunked a couple times. And I was like this dorky little white kid. And so I get on the bus a couple stops after him and walk up and play and win, you know. And so the other guys are like, oh, you know, like this isn't a hustle. Maybe I can win, you know. And so that's called being a pigeon, you know. And I think I was doing that with Leo, was the guy's name, in the 5th or 6th grade. We were really young to be pulling hustles like that on the bus, you know. And then, you know, I think one of my first real hustles on my own, we were in, we went to a middle school. It was called Albany Middle School, where Jimmy and I went. And I think I was in the 7th grade, and I'd gone to San Francisco with my folks for something. I don't know. We went over to the city, and we were driving through Chinatown, and we're sitting, you know, this was the 70s. We have a big station wagon, and I'm sitting in the back of the station wagon, you know, driving through Chinatown, and I see these teenage kids, and they're standing next to a garbage can. And this other kid walks up, and I'm watching, and he pulls out some money, and he gives them some money, and they reach in the garbage can, and they pull out a brick of firecrackers, because at that time you couldn't get fireworks at all in California. It was really hard, and they were selling black market firecrackers. And I watched this all go down. The next weekend, I was on BART, went to the city, you know, fucking ran, you know, like just made my way through Chinatown till I saw those 2 kids standing by the garbage can, and I bought a brick of firecrackers, and I came back and I sold them for, you know, like a pack. I can't remember for sure. I think they cost me like 25 cents a pack, and I was selling them for $1 at school.
Right.
You know, so I was like, while Jimmy was honing his skateboarding skills, I was honing some of my other skills.
He was street skating, and you were just learning street tactics.
Yeah, we did pull some moves together, though. He probably would never talk about this, but we used to steal BMX bikes together.
Oh.
And so that was a hustle for a little while. You know, kids, neither Jimmy or I came from, you know, our parents, well, he lived with his mom. I lived with both my parents, but we weren't poor, but we were in no way well off. You know,
right.
We were middle class or lower middle class kids or whatever. But BMX had really started to blow up, you know, and these kids would get like nice BMX bikes, and they would just leave them sitting outside of a store, you know. So we'd ride 2 on one bike. You know, he'd usually ride me, and I'd be riding, like standing on the pegs, and we just keep an eye out, and we'd see some kid set his bike down and go to the store. I'd jump off, grab the bike, and we'd take off, you know. Uh-huh. And Jimmy's mom, they had a garage up there that was fairly, his mom never went in the garage. So we would take the bikes to Jimmy's garage, and we tear them all apart and rebuild them, you know, so it wouldn't be matching, you know, because everything is, people would know their bike, but, you know, if you took this frame and those cranks and, you know, refit it, and then, you know, sell it or run amok. And that went on for a little while till I stole this one bike, and it was a Redline Pro Line frame. And I really liked this frame. I'd never seen one before. And so I decided, this is one I'm keeping. What I didn't know was there were only 2 of them that had been sold in Northern California. So as soon as this bike was stolen, everybody was looking for it. And so one day so I went to a bike shop one day to get something, and there was a bunch of kids hanging out that knew who I was, and the guy in the bike shop saw the frame, and he's like, "Hey, who is that kid? You know, that's a stolen bicycle. And so I don't know if that was the first time the police showed up at my house, but it certainly wasn't the last time the police showed up at my house. Yeah.
Did you have brothers or sisters?
I had an older sister. She was 2 years older than I. She was a very straight, normal, kid. She lives in New York now. She got into sort of filmmaking and producing, and that's what she does in New York.
Okay.
She's a producer.
What do you think it was that made you just run amok like that? Like when we're kids, we just want to defy everybody, right?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of it had to do with hypocrisy. I really felt it's like back then. I mean, even now, with politics and everything, it's the shit that goes on. It makes me mad.
Yeah.
It makes me pissed. It makes me sick, and it makes me want to shake people and say, "Don't you fucking see what's really going on?
Yeah.
Like how fucked up shit is, and you act like everything's okay." And I think but I don't know why that struck me so, and I don't know why my reaction to it. It's not like I became some political activist.
Right.
I just became a total nihilist. I'm like, well, if the system's fucked, then fuck the system, and I'm just going to run amok and do whatever the fuck I want.
Is that kind of right when you started discovering punk rock and all that stuff? That was ninth grade?
Yeah, I think all of that kind of came together. Like I had this, I don't know, a loss of innocence when you're 11 or 12, where you really, at least for me, where it's like, okay, this is the real world. Like Star Wars ain't never gonna fucking happen,
There's no Santa.
Once you really have to face that Star Wars ain't never gonna fucking happen, I think for me that's when, I think I was kind of lost and disjointed and even a little. I was suicidal at that time. I was like, dude, fuck this. I ended up trying to commit suicide when I was, I don't know, 12 maybe, and they put me in Herrick Hospital, and but then I found punk rock, and then it was like Star Wars could happen, because it was like all these freaks and all these weirdos, and it's just like, okay, this is, and
cast of characters. So did you get introduced to punk rock by going to a show or something? That's kind of how I did. My friends took me to the Varsity in Palo Alto when I was a kid, and I was like, what the fuck is going on? Stage diving, all that shit. You're like, what? I'm in. And then we were back.
Who did you go see? Who was the?
I think the first one was, crazy enough as it sounds, I'm pretty sure it was Aggression and Suicidal Tendencies with maybe The Faction.
Wow.
I think it was a skate rock show, and I didn't even know what I was like. I didn't intentionally do that. I think it just happened to be my friends had gone and saw a show the week before. They were pretty much every Friday for a while. And they were like, dude, I forget who they saw. Maybe it was DOA or whoever. And they're like, you got to check this out. So the next Friday I went with them, and then we all were just skaters. And like you said, I think it was just natural, but then it was just on. We started going to the Farm on the bus, and on Broadway, the Stone. There was one in Palo Alto. I think it was called the Keystone or something.
Right. Yeah. Because there was the Keystone Berkeley, the Keystone Palo Alto, and the Stone in San Francisco.
So that was how we did it. But did you get brought to a show for your first time? Or
the first? My dad taught at UC Berkeley, and he took a sabbatical in God, it was 77 or 78. So we moved to Europe at that time. And so we were living in Wales in kind of like a tiny little town. He would go into Cardiff to work, but I was going to school in this little town in Wales. And there was an English kid that was in my class. And we were kind of the outcasts because the Welsh hate the English. And I was kind of some weird kid from America that nobody knew exactly, what to think of. And so me and this kid started hanging out. And one day after school, he goes, you got to come over to the house afterward. He goes, I got this record. He goes, I got this new record. And before this time, like I said, I listened to Elton John. I listened to disco and funk and R&B and soul. That was what was popular in the East Bay, in the 70s. But he had Nevermind the Bollocks, Here's the Sex Pistols record, and he put that record on, and it was on, and I remember coming back and hanging out with Jimmy, and I think that I'm like, you got to hear these guys. And I think he, if I remember this correctly, had been turned on to the Ramones by somebody. Okay. So he's like, check this out, and so punk rock was already like just kicking off and running amok in California, in Northern California and Southern California, pretty soon after. I started going to shows. The first show that I went to is when I came back, the Sex Pistols actually came through and played Winterland, and so my father was the one who told me about it.
That was your first show?
Like, okay. So I went and I snuck out, and I went and I was a scared little kid, but people were like, come on, like, here's a beer. Like, they could, and it was life-changing, and there were shows I would have to sneak out, but really my parents didn't have a lot of rules. My mother was fairly, she was a paranoid psychotic. She was mentally ill, and it would come and it would go. When I started running amok, they really didn't know how to handle that at all, and until, I was 15 years old. By that time, I'd been to juvenile hall. Like I said, I was on felony probation. I had drugs all over the house. There was, and my mom finally at 15, she's like, you got to go, like, get the fuck out of here. Do not come back, and because they just did not know how to deal with me, So Solano Avenue is the main street that goes through Albany, and that's where Jimmy and I grew up. That's where we went to school. I was 15 years old. I was walking down Solano Avenue, and a cop car pulls up and stops, and a cop gets out, one of the Albany cops, and I didn't recognize him specifically. I knew a bunch of the Albany cops from run-ins, but I didn't recognize this one. He goes, McBride, he goes, you are not welcome on Solano Avenue. He goes, if any of us see you, you're going to fucking jail. So don't let any of us see. I'm a 15-year-old kid.
From stealing bikes, or?
Yeah, just from, I was on felony probation for, I trashed one of the schools and stole a car. And I was a known drug dealer too. Okay. And when I was a freshman in high school, I think I went for maybe about 6 months till I really stopped going. But in that 6-month period, they knew that I was dealing weed mostly, and they knew it, and they kept trying to bust me. But in the first 6 months, the cops came to the school, they pulled me out of class, they'd search me, they'd search my locker, and they'd never catch me. So they just knew that I was a problem. So yeah, they're like, we don't want to see you on this streets of Albany anymore. you know.
Right.
So
Wow. Yeah, we were a little milder. We would go downtown because the police were so bored in my town that they would chase skateboarders. And so we would just like think it was funny, and we would like, you can't catch us. And we would go through the laundromats to the alley and just circle around, and like, it was just playing like, you know, hide and go seek or something. They get so pissed. Who knows? But back then, I don't really remember, but I feel like it all starts with a frustrated moment. Like, you're like, what do you mean we can't skateboard on the sidewalks? What do you mean? They're called sidewalk surfboards. Like, come on, fuckers. You know what I mean? It's like, what?
I think that a lot of those rules didn't actually start happening until after I'd already dropped out of high school.
Right.
I dropped out of high school in 79.
Okay.
You know, and so because I do remember, like, the principal in the high school, he pulled me into his office and he was giving me shit about the way I was dressed and I was causing problems. And you know, I always had a skateboard and I'd skate down the halls, you know, and he's like, he would try and say, well, like, you can't do that. I'm like, there's no rule about that, you know, because there wasn't at that time, you know, and he was like, he gets so pissed because they're, you know, like, he couldn't bust me for stupid shit like that because those rules hadn't actually been implemented.
Right.
You know, so I'd skate down the halls. I'd fucking dress however I wanted. You know, I mean, some of the shit I definitely, you know, I would get in trouble for, but, you know, a lot of it, they just hadn't actually written down a rule yet for it. So it was kind of, you know, it was kind of like, okay, whatever, you know, you're mad, whatever, fuck off, you know.
Did you get the name Sammy Town because you were dealing drugs in the East Bay and that became your town? Like, how did that story go?
So some years moving right along, we were, there was a couple bands that were super tight. There was Fang, Tales of Terror from Sacramento, and Code of Honor. Code of Honor had Dave and Joel, you know, the Chavez brothers.
Yeah.
All of us in all three of those bands, we were like a family. You know, we would hang out in Sacramento all the time. Those guys would come down, and I used to be called Slammy way back originally because I was always in the pit. I was always, you know, I was always, in fact, our first record, that's what everybody knew me as, because I was always slam dancing, stage diving.
Yeah.
At the Keystone, Berkeley, when I was 14, I backflipped off the stage and everybody moved. I had to get my head stapled back together, you know. So this is probably 84, because it was after Landshark came out, or it might have been 83 after the record came out. But Tales of Terror played at the On Broadway in San Francisco. And I, by that time I was dealing acid. You know, when I first started, I dealt mostly weed. I'd started dealing weed way back. And, but by then I had been brought into the acid family. I was one of the older members, one of his boys, one of his proteges, you know, and so I had started dealing acid. So I'd always, you know, all those guys, I'd always get them fucked up on acid. And so the Tales of Terror played at the On Broadway, and we came back to the East Bay, and we're going to Tripp's house. Tripp, the guitar player, he was another childhood friend of mine. He became the guitar player for one of the guitar players for Tales of Terror. All of them were from Sacramento, except for Tripp was from the East Bay. And so we're going back to Tripp's house to party after the show. And I'm really drunk, but they're all frying super hard on acid. And we got off the freeway in downtown Oakland. And I don't even remember why we got off the freeway, but we're driving down Broadway. And back then, Broadway was the host row, you know, and so we're driving along, and they're all like checking all these hookers out. And I don't know. Maybe there wasn't really a hostro in Sacramento, but this is like these guys, and they're also frying on us. Like, oh my God, screaming at them. And we're driving down. I'm like, hey, stop, right? And they're like, what? And I'm like, I know those hookers, And there are these two chicks who are walking on the street. I'm like, hey, Shelly, right? And so we pull over, and they're like, what's up, Sammy? And so there was these two hookers that I knew. I'd shot dope with them, and I hung out with them. And I'm like, what are you guys doing? They're like, well, we're working, but there ain't nothing happening. I'm like, well, let's go party. Come on, get in the fucking van, And Tail the Terror's just like, they're looking at me like, no fucking way, because they were still, I think, a little more sheltered than I was at that point, So these hookers hop in the van, and they have an apartment not that far. So we go over to their apartment to go party with these hookers. And so I break off with them when we get there because I want to get some heroin, and they were going to get some heroin. So we pooled our money together. They called their dope dealer, and I passed out because I was super drunk, So I passed out on one of their beds, and Tail the Terror, like partying with these hookers. They're like taking their clothes off, It's like crazy hooker party, and the dope man shows up, and he sells them, some heroin, and they're cooking it all up, and so they're actually going to give me my issue, even though I was passed out, which I have to admit, that's pretty fucking rad that they actually didn't just do it all, since I was passed out. But none of those guys in Tail the Terror, I think at that point had ever shot up before. And all of a sudden they see these hookers with needles, and they think that they're trying to kill me because they're also frying on acid. So then all of a sudden they start freaking out. They're like, no, you can't kill him. And then they're freaking out. They're like trying to grab the rigs. The chicks are like, get away from my dope, and it becomes this huge scene. They grab me and fucking like firemen carry me out the door, and we take off and go back to Tripp's house. So the Tail of the Terror guys started calling Oakland Sammy's Town. Let's go down to Sammy's Town. We'll eat some acid. We'll have some crazy adventure down there. It'll be completely off the hook. And so then it just kind of stuck. They just started calling me Sammy Town, and that's the origin of that name. They all had nicknames though. Tail of the Terror had nicknames for everybody, and so it was a pretty normal thing for them, but that's just the one that they gave me, and it stuck.
Well, let's backtrack a little bit though, because you were already in Fang at that time then?
Yeah.
You were in a band before Fang, right?
Yeah, I was in two bands before Fang. One of them was like literally a garage band. We practiced at my parents' house. It was me and Turner, who later went on to play in Special Forces. And we had David Gaines and this guy, Matt. And I don't know if they never really went on to playing in other bands, but we were called Reign of Terror. And we were like 13, I think, or maybe 14. We were like really young, but we made our own shirts, like stencil spray paint style. We had a songbook. I played bass in that band actually. And Turner played guitar, and Matt played drums. This guy, David, he was the singer, but we never actually played a show. After that, I was asked to sing for a band called Shut Up. And Shut Up was a band these other guys had put together, and they had a singer, but I don't know what happened. The guy who was singing for him was named Mark, and they had a show at the Sound of Music, and the Sound of Music is super gnarly punk rock dive bar in the Tenderloin back in the 70s. And they needed a singer. Maybe Mark's mom wouldn't let him go out and play. I don't know. But anyway, they asked me to sing for him. So I sang for them for a while. We played, at the Sound of Music. And then what happened was that I was hanging out at that time. My best friend was this guy, Joel Fox, and he was quite a bit older. I think I was 15. It was like 1980. And Joel was probably like 22, and he had a car, and he played in a band he was a drummer. He played in Subsidized Mess, and that band broke up, and those guys went on with a different drummer and a different singer to become Crucifix.
Oh, okay.
And so, and I don't remember why Subsidized Mess broke up, but anyway, Tom Flynn, the guitar player from Fang, he had moved to California. He'd started Fang in Connecticut as like a 2-piece noise band. And then he went to college in Chicago, and Brian, the other guy in Fang, in 78, went to college in Texas. So they broke Fang up. Tom went to college in Chicago for like 3 weeks, said, fuck this, I'm going to California. And so he moved to California and moved to Berkeley, and he started Fang back up, him on guitar and singing. And then he got a bass player and a drummer. And they played maybe a couple shows as a 3-piece like that. And then I don't know why they got rid of the drummer. I don't know what happened. If the original drummer in California was this guy, Chris Ritter. I don't know if he quit or if they threw him out, but they were looking for drummers, and they hit up Joel. And so I went with Joel for his tryout for Fang. And this was at a warehouse called New Method Warehouse. First place the Bad Brains ever played in California. They did shows there. No way. It was an underground warehouse down in Emeryville.
Oh shit.
Yeah. And so, but bands practiced there. So Joel tried out for Fang, and Tom is like, yeah, we want you to play drums. And after they tried him out and they brought him in, I told Tom, and I'd never met Tom before. I'm like, hey, I think you guys need a lead singer. And Tom's like, yeah, I've thought about that. He goes, do you know anybody? I'm like, yeah, me. So in my 15-year-old arrogance, I was like, yeah, I could do that. So he's like, well, come back, next practice with Joel, and we'll try you out. And I came back the next practice and tried out, and then that was it.
What was that, like 81, 82?
Well, I think Not So Quiet on the Western Front came out in 82. So I want to say it was probably 81, maybe. Okay. Like we'd been playing around before we recorded the first time. So I think it was probably 81. Like I think I turned 16 right around the time Fang really started playing out live.
Okay.
And because I was quite a bit younger than everybody. I know that I was 16. I think I'd already, maybe when I first started, I might have still been 15, but I was 16 when we started playing shows, and those guys were all over 21 at that time.
Okay. That's sick when you're a little kid, but they're all driving you around. They can buy the booze. Like you're just like, I'm in.
Exactly.
All right. Oh shit. Do you remember like some of the first songs that you worked on with the band, like that you were a part of in creating?
They had some of the stuff that they'd already written, but then I started writing lyrics, and we started, because they only had, for whatever reason, it seemed like a handful of songs, so we started writing stuff pretty much immediately, so Landshark, when Landshark came out, I'd have to look at the song list because it's been so long, but I would say that, maybe 75% of the songs on that were my lyrics.
I'm guessing Fun with Acid.
No, that's the irony, which is but that was a Tom Flynn song, which was even funnier because it was, because that was my deal. I was an acid dealer, I was this like little kid acid dealer, and everybody knew me for that. And so that was kind of bizarrely ironic, that Tom wrote that. We recorded that. Tim Yohannan, he did Maximum Rock and Roll.
Oh yeah.
And so me and Tim, we never really got along. He wasn't wrong. I was a troublemaker. I was, like I was kind of a known drug dealer, and I would get into trouble fairly often. And, there was, some fighting and just, I was a problem.
Yeah.
But when he started asking bands to do Not So Quiet on the Western Front, that was the first compilation album that came out of the Bay Area. He hit us up. He asked Fang, he's like, you guys want to be on this, and he was like trying to let bygones be bygones. It's like, okay. So we submitted, I think just like most everybody else, we all submitted a handful of songs. We went and recorded, we recorded like 5 songs. And then he choose, like for all the bands, he would choose one of those songs and put it on the record. And he was the one who chose Fun with Acid. Out of those 5, there was, I think we recorded The Money, we recorded A-OK, recorded Fun with Acid. We recorded a song called Conviction. Maybe it was only 4. Anyway, that was a song that Tim Yohannan picked. And so after that record came out, he was a DJ on KPFA radio. And every week he would have a different band from the record that he would interview. And he'd play their song, and if they had any other material, he'd play more material. And so once that record came out, and there was a shit ton of bands, so everybody was in line, to get interviewed on KPFA. And when it was our turn, we came in there, and Tim Yohannan had thought that song was about Vietnam, because the helicopters. And so he keeps trying, so he's interviewing us, and he keeps trying to like make it into some like political statement. And we're like, no, it's just about being fucking whacked out of your mind on acid. And, I think by the end of that, he was just like, oh my God, these fucking guys.
Yeah. But, did Tom write The Money Will Roll Right In?
Chris Wilson wrote the music, and then Tom wrote the lyrics. I changed some of the lyrics, not a lot of them, but he had, like, there was a handful of songs, like I said, that he had written the lyrics for, and I would alter them a little bit when I would sing them. He would say, here they are, and I would change them up a little bit. But he wrote The Money Roll Right In. I think off Landshark, I think that Tom, he wrote The Money, and I think there was one other song that he wrote the lyrics for. Once I joined the band, we played some of the songs that he had written the lyrics for, but then I just wrote all the lyrics after that. He never, and some of the songs he wrote musically, and some Chris Wilson, the bass player, wrote the music for.
Yeah, I think that's when I got into you guys, was Landshark. Most of the song lyrics, at least for that, were pretty like out of satire, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, there was a lot of satire. Skinheads smoke dope, destroy the handicap. Yeah, there was a lot of satire.
Is there like any stories behind? Like, is there like we were hanging out and we were just getting fucked up, and then we started saying "destroy the handicap," and all of a sudden it became a song? Like what? Is there anything like that for any of that stuff?
Well, Berkeley was one of the first towns in the world, certainly, well, I don't want to say the world, in America, where they had a large handicapped population.
Oh.
And there was like they made wheelchair ramps before any other town, like they were actually very pro handicap, before anybody else was. And so I was going to Barrington Hall. Barrington Hall they had punk rock shows at Barrington Hall. It was like it was a college dorm, but it was like this den of it was like any drug you wanted, you could get there. They had punk rock shows there. It was awesome.
Right.
You'd go there and see Flipper, and there'd be an acid punch bowl, and this was like 1979. I mean, it was just fucking, off the hook there. So I was going to I was going to Barrington for some reason. It was during the day, and I was walking. I took the bus, I got off the bus and I walked up Dwight Way to go to Barrington Hall. And I was not paying attention to what I was doing. And this guy in a wheelchair, like fucking, I literally like look up, and I was probably carrying my skateboard, and I had to jump out of the way, because he was like hauling ass, and we exchanged words, and out of my mouth it just came, well, fucking destroy the handicap. And I mean, I wasn't serious about it. We were just talking shit. Me and this guy were yelling at each other. It wasn't even like serious, but that moment stuck with me, and so then I just ran with it, and also there was just, at that time, punk rock was about, there was shock value was still a big thing in punk rock. It's hard to put it into terms that people can understand, but when I was, I pierced my ear when I was a freshman in high school, and I would get jumped and assaulted and yelled at, pretty much, maybe not jumped every day, yelled at every day, threatened every day. I dyed my hair blue and I had an earring, and it was hard. It was dangerous. You did that back then in 1979, and you things were different back then as far as that goes, and so, that was extremely shocking, to have blue hair and to be a guy with your ear pierced, that was like, it was a big deal because you put yourself at risk.
Right.
It was absolutely dangerous to run around looking like that, and so, and I think that those of us, we were very much, taking that to the next level, being as shocking as we could, in your face as we could,
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that you had songs like Destroy the Handicap, Crippled Children Suck by the Meatmen. I mean, there's a lot of satire and like just total, like, over the top, fuck you,
Right. I was wondering if you could describe some of the clubs that were some of your favorite ones that were in those early days. Like, what was Winterland like? Like, what are some of these ones that I never got to go to? Like, Winterland stuck out, right?
Well, except for it was a big club. Like, I liked smaller, I mean, one of the coolest places that they did shows was the Temple Beautiful. That was the Jim Jones Temple. So when Jim Jones went to Guyana, his church sort of sat there empty for a while, and they actually started throwing punk rock shows there.
Okay.
For a very short period of time. That was interesting. The Deaf Club was an interesting place because it was literally a club for deaf people. Whoa. But they could feel the vibrations through the floor. And so they actually started letting punk rock shows happen because, it was, for them, it was like an experience.
That's
so
amazing.
The Deaf Club was cool.
Where was that? In the East Bay or SF?
No, that was San Francisco.
Oh.
There weren't a lot of, they did shows at the International Cafe, like early on. Keystone Berkeley, like saw, they did, those are bigger shows. Like I saw like Dead Kennedys when they started getting, kind of popular, they would have, but the Plasmatics. So the Plasmatics at the Keystone Berkeley, it's fucking, that was the loudest band I ever fucking saw, was the Plasmatics. They were just so loud, so mind blowing. They did an in-store at Universal Records. So Universal Records on Telegraph Avenue is like this underground record store. And it was our hangout. It was like, you go up to Telegraph, you'd go hang out at Universal Records or go play pinball at Silver Ball. But the Plasmatics came through and they did it in-store, but basically they just showed up and we all got drunk. We all just, got beer and we're just hanging out at the store with the Plasmatics drinking. And then like Susie and the Banshees came through the Universal Records and just hung out. they were a little more uptight than the Plasmatics were.
I can imagine. Plasmatics by all time.
I think for me, when I really started, like, I wasn't really sneaking out anymore. I would just leave. But when I was really going to shows like every weekend, the MAB and a little later on the MAB and the On Broadway and 10th Street Hall. 10th Street Hall was on 10th Street. It was a hall, and Paul Ratt put on shows at 10th Street Hall, and it was big and it was underground at the same time. He would have like 8-10 bands, bringing in bands from LA or touring bands. And it was, it's funny because I don't really know how big it really was. In my mind, it was like, it was big, and it would seem like there would be, a couple hundred people, like 200-300 people. Slam dancing had started, and it was just completely insane, So 10th Street Hall is one of my favorite places. And then underground, like I said, the Sound of Music was super gnarly. It was a bar, and so the drinking age was 21. Even back then in California,
right?
And so we were like kids. But they had a parking lot next to the Sound of Music. So we would hang out in the parking lot and drink, even if we couldn't get into the show. Mm. And they had a backstage room that was behind the stage, and you could sometimes sneak in and watch the bands from behind, and so there was, I don't know, a handful of us kids that would go to the Sound of Music regularly. It's probably like 20 or 30, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids that would all hang out in the parking lot and try and sneak in and get kicked out. And, those were some of my favorite places to hang out.
Where do you think Fang played the most in the Bay Area? Did they play at Gilman or Farm or on Broadway? Which club did they probably play at the most?
Probably the On Broadway, I would say. If you had to, we probably played there more than anywhere else. But we played a lot of shows back then. We played pretty often. Became a regular, band that would get booked, and we started putting out records, and then we started touring, and I had a lot of friends in the East Bay. There was like the BTU, which is like a loose knit kind of Berkeley Trailers Union. They were all friends of mine, and they would all, like when we would play, they would all come out. So no matter where we'd play, we'd bring at least 30, 40, 50 people. Aside from just the regular shows. But the thing about it is that when you had a show back then, everyone would go anyway.
Right.
Yeah,
it wasn't really mattering where you were playing. It was who was playing.
Yeah. If there was a punk rock show, everyone would go.
So I talked to you this before, but I think it's kind of important. To me, the Farm was a pretty important place for me because it was right off the 101, and I lived in the peninsula. So I'd take the 7B, it would drop me off right there. There's the park. And what kids today might not know is there's a Potrero skate park there now. Right next to it is the Farm. That building that's next to the skate park used to have punk shows. And I spent a lot, I've seen more shows there than any other place probably. I would say maybe on Broadway, but I think the Farm, just because it was easier and we heard about them all the time.
And once the Farm really started getting going, they had shows there, like good shows every weekend, it seemed.
Yeah, and I'm a little later, like I'm probably 85, 86, I think is when it started maybe. In my recollection, every Friday, if they were in town, verbal abuse and DRI were on the bill, and then it was just whoever else was coming through. But I would put my right hand out of whatever you got to do to swear. I would say I've seen DRI and verbal abuse more than any other band. Like they must have played 100 times in front of me or something. Like it was nuts. Like looking back at it, I'm like, am I dramatizing, or were they just every Friday at the farm? Like, here they are again. I mean, that was when Scotty was in verbal abuse, and it was VA Rocks Your Liver. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's before DRI kind of changed too. Like it was just, I don't know, for me, that was it. Like when we look back and we say, this isn't punk, that's punk, and blah, blah, blah. You know, the old guy that never wanted to be the old guy, and now he's the old guy saying, back in my day. But yeah, I mean, I saw false prophets, I think it was, burning Bibles in there. Like we just saw things that were like life-changing in a weird way, you would say. Like just like opening your eyes to, like, especially for suburban kids, right? It's like, what is going on? I need more of this. Like, I can't figure this out, but it's fucking bananas. And the crew, I think his name was Theo, maybe, the guy that worked, and he was stage diving, but he was
Theo
also
Jack.
security.
He was skaters,
Yeah.
Theo. He later went on to become a tattoo artist, Theo Jack.
Right. So like, I don't know, like have you seen any documentaries on that kind of stuff or anything?
There's a farm documentary.
Oh, there is.
Yeah.
I
It
never
came
seen
out.
it.
It's actually really good. You of all people, you definitely should check it out. It might be on YouTube. I know that it was out for a while, and then I think they kind of had pulled it back. And I remember just a little while ago, I heard that they're going to do some sort of a re-release, you know, of it. But
cool.
it has,
I'll check. I'll look for it.
You should. Yeah, look it up. See if you can find it on YouTube. I know that there's at least some of it's on YouTube. You could find. You might not be able to find the whole thing, but.
And then of course they had
there.
the day on the dirts and day at the farm, where it was like, I mean, Bad Brains, RKL, Fang, like, of course, DRI, verbal abuse. My mind's kind of circle jerks, probably, like whoever was. It was just, I don't know. It felt like kind of like a festival, but not a festival. It was like the punk shows were that caliber, where it wasn't just one good band headlining and a bunch of shitty bands. It was like from beginning to end, it felt like it was like kind of like all-star caliber. It seemed
right.
like that.
I think that was pretty normal at the farm. You would have, like, I look at flyers from back then. I'm like, God damn.
Yeah.
What a fucking lineup. I'm like,
Right.
holy shit, you know?
Yeah.
And the farm had some great shows, and it was big too. I mean, it was like, you know, there would be 500 people in there, you know, and you're talking about Theo, and I still remember this today. We were playing at the farm, and you know, the stage was kind of high at the farm in comparison to a lot of other clubs, you know, and we're playing, and Theo takes off across the stage, and he starts running on people's heads, and to the point where, you know, it was packed. But I think the whole band even stopped, because, you know, he made it like 50 feet out into the crowd on just running on. I mean, Theo was a small guy, you know, and he was a good skater, you know. It's just like, but it was just mind blowing how far he made it running on people's heads till finally he drops into the pit, you know. But that was the farm. The farm is a great place. And
it was
epic shows, you know.
Yeah, we had a blast there. Was the Winterland where you saw, was that the Misfits show that was like somebody's head got cracked open or something like that?
So Winterland closed down, and they had they had like the Fillmore, but so the Fillmore, which is the Fillmore again,
that's where it was, right?
The Fillmore closed, and Wes Robinson, who had Ruthie's in a club in the East Bay, he started booking shows at the Fillmore. And so they had made a stage on the floor. They didn't have like the big stage in the back. They made a stage on the floor, and they had great shows there too. It didn't last super long, and the whole thing, it was cool because it was all falling down and in disrepair. So it added to the ambiance of, like just fucked up punk rock,
Yeah.
But the Misfits came through, and it was, I've never really experienced it. Definitely had never experienced like this before then. There was a real negative attitude towards the Misfits in the Bay Area before they came. I listened to the Misfits, before they came, and they weren't like my favorite band, but I liked them. I wasn't a huge fan, but like I said, didn't matter who was playing. Everyone, you went to every show, and so I don't know who played before them, but I just remember a lot of people saying, "Oh, the Kiss Fits," because they wore makeup and it was like a shtick band, and for whatever reason, that was really looked down upon in the Bay Area. I don't know why, but when they started playing, it was very normal for people to throw beer cans, for people to spit at you. That was like part of the deal. It was all part of punk rock and, in good fun, so to speak, and if you didn't like it, then you wouldn't be there anyway. But as soon as they started playing, people were like hurling shit at them. Like it wasn't, and we're like, fuck you and fuck the Kiss Fits. And they were like pelting them with beer cans, And so I kind of just watching, I'm like, wow, this, it's like kind of weird, like I'd never seen, and like we all knew each other, all my friends,
Yeah.
I don't know if it was, they might have made it into their third song. I don't even know if they made it in their third song. It might have been their second song. And they're getting like pelted, and it's not like ha 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 fun punk rock. This is like, very aggro. And so finally, the drummer jumps up, and he probably got nailed in the face with something, and he got pissed. He jumps up from behind the kit, and he comes out, and he's gonna like to swing on somebody. And Kelly, who was he's East Bay punk rock kid, and he was always as far as like all the East Bay, he was one of our better street fighters. Dude was he was a little older than us, and he'd been around. He was a real good street fighter. And that dude came like to go swing on somebody, and Kelly just fucking blasted him, hit him hard and knocked him back onto the stage. And at that point, Doyle takes his bass and just fucking whips it out and comes, and he hits Tim Sutliff over the head, and Timmy was our boy, it was Timmy was probably 14 or 15. He was like, we were all young, but he was a kid, and Doyle was a kid. Doyle was probably 17 when he did that, and but he hit Timmy, and then everything just stopped. And then they ran, they just dropped everything, because we all at that point went for him. And there was this really narrow staircase that went up to a backstage room. And Wes Robinson had security that worked these shows. And they were all these older, pretty big, black guys from Oakland that, we all knew because they always worked security. But when it kicked off, those guys ran off the stage, and security just like dipped in and like wedged themselves in this staircase, so we destroyed all their equipment. We smashed all. In fact, I had the skull from the headstock of the bass that I ended up giving to my girlfriend at the time, Denise. She had it. She probably still has it, we completely destroyed all their equipment, because they literally like dropped everything. It just ran. Yeah. So then there's this big standoff at the staircase, and we're telling the bouncers like, look, just go, just walk away. And they're like, like, we know you guys, this is our job. We just leave. But they said, but look, they got to come outside sometime, and so they finally, we didn't want to fight the bouncers. We knew those guys, and we're like, all right. So they talked us into waiting for them outside. And so I was outside till 9 a.m, and I know there were people there till noon or 1 p.m. that waited for. So they were trapped in the elite club until like the next afternoon before they could actually leave, because there was, two people waiting outside to beat them. And that's why the Misfits didn't come back and play in the Bay Area for a long, long, long time.
That's right. Yeah, my friend, I have a couple of friends that were at that show, and they talked. I think, what's his name, Timmy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that guy got really messed up. Like he might have to, I don't know, something happened to his head when he got hit.
He got 100 stitches, but he was okay. It didn't like give him permanent brain damage, but it fucked him up at the time. I mean, he, it like just split his head open. He shaved his head at the time, and it just fucking, and at the time I was pissed, I'm sure if we'd have got a hold of those guys at that time, we would have beat them badly. Right. You get older and, you realize, dude, those guys were scared, and they had reason to be scared. Like the crowd was, fucking, for whatever reason, looking for blood, and like I said, I think Doyle at the time was only 17 years old himself. He fucking probably, did the, out of panic and fear, did the only thing he could think of to do, so, you get a little older, you start realizing it's not all black and white. And, it's, I'm sure those guys were fucking terrified,
Yeah.
So.
Crazy one. Like out of all the bands you've played with, I mean, this might be way too hard of a question, but I was wondering if there's any bands that stick out as like, maybe you saw Bad Brains for the first time because you opened for them or something like that, where it was just a magical moment where, dude, this band from Tucson no one's heard of, or whatever it is, you know what I mean?
Well, the first time I saw DOA, now I'd been to some shows before, but DOA, it was Randy Rampage, Chuck Biscuits, Dave Gregg. They played in Berkeley it was like the International Cafe. I'd seen shows, but I'd never seen a band that animated. Like they were all over the place, like fucking jumping and they were like right there with, it was a very small place. And it was just like, it was such next level, they were just amazing musicians, they're amazing band, but just their presence, and it set the bar, for, it's like, wow, like that's who I want to be like, and then of course the Bad Brains, it's like you see the Bad Brains, it's like, live, their stage presence, the show HR is just fucking mind blowing,
Yeah.
But other bands, like Tales of Terror, Rat's Ass would do, he would also do like standing backflips, and Tales of Terror, one of those bands, they were either they would put on shows and they would either be too fucked up and it would be a total shit show, or they would be one of the best bands you've ever seen in your life. It could go either way.
Okay, yeah.
They put on some incredible shows, and it's unfortunate. I mean, they were one of those bands that crashed and burned early. Put out one record. Lion got killed, the guitar player, in just a random street fight. They all just crashed and burned, and it was really unfortunate because they were an incredible live band. Certainly DOA and the Bad Brains, and then Tales of Terror, as far as just like live shows, it was just, they were like the pinnacle,
Oh yeah. What about like, I don't really know how to talk about it too much, but like we got to get into the prison a little bit at least to because I have some questions about, like, it's crazy to me that you were in prison before Nirvana was a band, and you came out and Kurt Cobain was dead already, and they're like a legendary band that covered Fang, and you kind of missed that whole thing. And so there was, like, you were in prison for how long? 7 years?
7 years. I fell in 89 and I got out in 96.
There's a lot of bands that covered a few of your guys' songs and stuff that are pretty legendary bands. I just wonder what that feeling is like.
It's weird for me because people now talk about bands selling out, and that wasn't really talked about when we were kids, you know, like in young punk rock bands, but it was a lifestyle. It was just like who we were. Sort of when we were like, if a big label had offered us money, I don't even know, you know, like to go on, you know, I don't know. It's like, dude, I don't want anybody telling me what to do. And, you know, I don't, you know, like early on, I mean, all that obviously changed, but since I was so removed from everything that was going on, I kind of didn't even know. You know, I mean, it's not like in prison you know, hear anything about like the underground music scene. But I will say that I was in Soledad, and Soledad's it's a hard prison. It was fucking gnarly. My cellie had a radio, and they had a radio station down there that played rock and sort of newer rock just during the day. They this is in the Salinas Valley. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. And I'm listening to the radio, and I heard da 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 da, you know, the beginnings of the Nirvana song. And I'm like, dude, this is punk rock on the fucking radio. I'm like, who is this? You know? I was just sitting on my cell, kind of like mind blown that, you know, a punk rock band was actually getting commercial radio play, you know, and that was my first experience with Nirvana. You know, it was just like hearing them in that cell going, holy shit, they're like playing punk rock on the fucking, you know, on the radio. But like you said, by the time I paroled, Kurt had already killed himself, you know, and Seattle always had a really cool scene. You know, we played in Seattle a lot in the 80s, and they had sort of like the early like Malfunction, you know, which one of the, you know, they later on broke out to like Mother Love Bone, and I think one of the guys went on to be in Pearls, you know, that was starting to fester, you know, in like 84, 85, you know, and like Mark Arm and Mudhoney and all those guys were around, you know, and came up and hung out. And I think Fang was well, you talk about DRI. So DRI put out that 17 song 7-inch or whatever, you know. And so it was like in, you know, from 83, 84, 85, everyone was trying to play faster and faster and faster. A lot of bands were really, you know, DR was sort of like the pinnacle because they could play really fast, you know. But that was one thing that sort of made Fang different, is that we didn't play fast. We were kind of like this slow, weird, dirgy punk rock band, you know, not quite as dirgy as Flipper, but we'd go up to Seattle, we'd play there, we'd hang out with those guys, and it jived with what they were starting to do, you know. And so I think that's why I'm like, he probably came and saw Fang when he was, you know, 14 or 15, you know, when we came through, I'm assuming, you know. And so being a 16 or 17-year-old kid, you know, writing those songs and going out there and playing, there was no way I could have imagined that what we were doing then would later influence bands like Nirvana and Metallica and Green Day, who were some of the biggest bands in the world. Yeah. You know, and so that's kind of just like a very, it's still mind blowing to me, because we're just a bunch of fucking, especially me. I was just a fuck up,
I mean, I guess you toured so much, but I was going to say, like, to me, Metallica and Green Day makes sense because it's Bay Area. They probably saw you at the Gilman or whatever,
Yeah.
But like for like Butthole Surfers maybe, or Nirvana, or like.
Yeah, Butthole Surfers, because Texas, we played in Texas a bunch, and some of the guys in Tales of Terror moved down there, and I started selling acid down there. I started going down there and selling acid. So I'd sell acid to the Butthole Surfers. There was definitely a history and a connection between Texas and us, bands like the Hickoids and the Butthole Surfers when they were, early on, the Big Boys. We started going to Texas. We played down there pretty early on, and we'd come back because Austin had a really cool scene.
Yeah, Austin's always been kind of like the one, no disrespect to Texas, but Austin's just always been a lot favorite more than anywhere else there.
Yeah, right.
When you were in prison, did you write anything? Were you even thinking about music, or was your head in a whole different area?
So not at first. And then when I got to Soledad, they had a really good arts and correction program there. And the newer prisons didn't have that kind of action, like a lot of the newer ones.
Did you bounce around, or were you Soledad the whole time?
First I was in San Quentin, and then I was in Soledad. So Soledad had a really good arts and corrections program. And so I started going to high school, because I, had never graduated high school.
Yeah.
So, it's like, that was one thing they offered us, like, you want to go to high school, and so I went to high school in Soledad, and they had an arts and corrections program. And so there was a couple other guys there that I got together and started playing music with.
Oh.
And so, but that ended pretty rough. Pretty rough. It ended horribly, really. What happened was, it's kind of a long story, but the people who, prison is very segregated, and it's very much, like, these guys control the chow hall, and this clique, has this action, and I was still kind of green, so I had put this band together, and the Muslims up to that, they controlled the music room, and I didn't know that, and so and nobody told me that. So they were already upset that I had just sort of come in and organized this band. But I had no idea that was the case. Nobody, said anything about this. I already was creating enemies that I didn't know about by doing this. And at the same time, so there was a guy, his name was Jack, and he was what's called a free staff. There's guards, and then there are free staff. Free staff are like a chef, or, he ran the arts and corrections program, so he wasn't a guard. He worked in the prison, to, do a specific job. His job was to run the arts and corrections program.
Okay.
And so I was also taking a writing class from this woman, and her and I got along really well. She was an awesome writer. Her name was Claire, but Jack, I think, suspected there was something going on between me and this woman, although there wasn't. And he really, I think, had the hots for her, and so I think he was jealous of my relationship with her, even though it was completely, there was nothing going on other than, a student and teacher that had a good rapport. So what ended up happening, it was July 4th, and they're going to do a yard show. So all the bands that practice can go out and play a couple songs on the yard. And so we got us, Jack's like, you guys want to play? We're like, sure, we'll go we were just going to do one song. It's called Electric Chair. later came out on a record we put out. But we go to play our one song, and the way it's set up at the central yard, you come out of the cell blocks, and there's a little yard that has a boxing ring and a stage, and you walk through that to go through another gate to get to the big yard. So if they have bands play there, if there's a boxing match, people can stand in the big yard and watch it, but you're actually separated from the big yard by a fence, you're in this small yard. So we go out there and play. What I didn't know was that the Muslims had told Jack, they had dropped a kite saying that if my band played on the yard, that they were going to kill me. But I didn't know this. And what he was supposed to do when he gets a kite like that is take it to the guards and say, hey, there's a problem, but because he didn't like me, he didn't say anything to anybody. And he went ahead and put my band on anyway. So we're playing, it was one song. We fucked up the song. The guitar player ended up shooting a bunch of heroin right before we played. Anyway, it's a shit show.
Prison.
Yeah. So we play our one song, and all of a sudden there's all these dudes standing on the other side of the fence, and they're all like staring at me, and I'm like, this is bad. Like something is not right here. They're all in the yard, and this one guy, he was a Piru blood that I actually knew from the writing class. He came up to me and he goes, hey, Sammy, he goes, those guys, they want you, I'm like, why? He goes, bro, I don't know. And I shouldn't even be talking to you, but just like, I'm just letting you know, you got a problem, And so I went up to the fence, and at that time there was maybe 20 or 30 guys on the other side of the fence, and they're like, we're going to kill you. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what the fuck? And so the people that had a problem with me, they worked the crowd and said that I was saying things that I didn't say. And so this started building up, and I'm trying to talk to them. And finally there was a guy that lived in my cell block, and he was class of 72. So it's big dude. He'd been on death row, and when they repealed death row, he'd come off death row. He had a couple of prison killings under his belt, and he's standing on the other side of the fence going, I know where you live. I'm going to fucking kill you. Right. And I'm like, I'm fucked, I'm like, okay. So at that point, I pull the guitar player over, and I'm like, look, you got to go into the yard. You got to tell my cellie that I'm coming in the yard, but these guys are going to try and kill me, because at that point I figure, like, if I don't deal with this now, somebody's going to come up and they're going to fucking stab me in the, in the neck from behind,
right.
So if it's going to go on, if it's going to happen, then let's deal with it right now. So he went in, he got my cellie and about 4 or 5 other dudes, and they came and they met me at the gate, and so I come into the big yard, and we're trying to get to the far corner of the yard where all the homeboys are, but it's like on the far side of the yard. And as soon as I come in the yard, they see me coming in the yard. So they start massing up, and it ends up being a face-off. We had about maybe 100 dudes on either side facing off. And you can hear the gunners. They're all locking and loading because there's like no warning shots. They're waiting for it to kick off so they can start shooting us. I'll never forget this dude, Randy from Bakersfield. Like, he came up behind me, tapped me on the back. He hands me a piece because we had knives buried all over the yard. So everyone's digging up their knives, and, like that dude handed me a piece. And so we couldn't go any farther, but the homeboys had come up. So it's this huge face off, and it's going back and forth. They're like, we're going to kill that dude. It's like, yo, you're not killing. You kill him, you got to take on us all. And it's going back and forth. All these cops are coming out on the yard, but they're staying far away from us because they know if it kicks off, bullets are going to start, flying. And at that point, even on that walk, I figured I was dead. Like no matter what, I was going to die right there on that yard. You know, I don't know if it was going to be shot or, you know, if I was going to be stabbed to death, but I knew that there was no way I was going to walk off that yard. You know, that is probably the most scared I've ever been in my life. You know, I think you can get to a point in fear where you just sort of shut down, you know, and then you just do whatever you got to do, you know. And so we're faced off, like everybody's got knives. It's going back and forth. But they didn't really want to kick it off because everybody knew once we started fighting that they'd just start shooting all of us, you know? And so finally it was decided that it was going to be me and one dude one-on-one, you know? So I'm like, fuck, I might actually live today, you know, like who knows, maybe I won't die right now, you know? And so they picked one guy and we squared up, you know, he's got a knife, I got a knife, and we're about to start fighting. But, you know, everyone's looking around, and like I said, all the cops, you know, they're all sitting there with their mini 14s, all trained on us. And they're like, you know what, everybody will just back it off. And me and this kid, we'll meet in the shower later and we'll handle it, you know? So this whole time, Jack Bowers, the guy who ran the Arts and Corrections program, who sort of orchestrated all this by not doing anything about it, he's waiting for me to get killed, you know? And he sees that I'm not going to get killed right then. So he goes over to the cops now and he's like, yeah, it was McBride who started all that, you know? So we're walking back and all of a sudden they're like, inmate McBride, report to the yard check. That's where all the cops were. So I'm like, fuck, like hand my knife off to somebody. They gaffle me up. They arrest me for inciting a riot. They arrest me on the yard and then they take me to solitary confinement. So I walked off the yard that day and I ended up in solitary confinement for 5 months behind that, but I didn't die. But that was me trying to introduce punk rock to the yard in Soledad. And so I didn't really play any other music for the rest of my prison career. You know, I wrote songs,
right?
But I never really, never really tried to put another band together after that, you know.
That's heavy.
Yeah. It was intense.
Have you thought about writing a book?
Someday, you know, someday I'd like to do that. You know, it's,
seems like you have so many stories that are just like high level stories, man.
Someday. A lot of people, it's cool because there's so many, you know, a lot of people have written some good books, and I know someday I need to just sit down and start doing it. So I'm sure, hopefully if I don't die in some weird accident or something, I'll get around to it at some point.
And your memory seems to be doing all right. Like you can remember back, like I have a hard time sometimes in the early stages, like, yeah, you know, it could have been just a little dramatized maybe.
Some shit I can actually remember pretty well. And then some shit, somebody will tell me a story. I'm like, I have, you know, don't remember it at all. Before I write a book, I would definitely reach out to a bunch of people and hit them up and say, hey, you know, you remember this, you know, or, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, or like make a documentary or something where like you can get everybody's stories together and then like out of the 40 stories, one is pretty consistent and you can kind of mold it together or whatever. So I was always thinking like, let's ask this guy because he'll remember, you know, whatever.
He might remember. Yeah. But I mean, the other thing is that, you know, we're getting older. A lot of us that were around back then are not with us anymore. So, you know, that's
kind of why I'm doing all these interviews really is like the time is now. Like I want to know the stories now before, like, you know, I've had a few super close friends pass and I had amazing times with them, but I'd love to have had more. You know what I mean? Like it's like
Dude, like Jake. I mean, you know, when Jake died, I'm like, fuck. You know, I wish. I mean, Jake had a lot of stories, and a lot of people knew a lot of them. But it would have been great if somebody had actually spent a consistent amount of time with him, because he was a fucking nut. You know, he was.
Did you get to talk to him much at all after, like in the later years?
Yeah, I mean, I would go and I would run into him and see him, you know, and I mean, I'd known him for a long time, you know, and I actually went a couple of years ago. I had a tattoo shop in Alameda, and then I had another one in Oakland, and so every year we got on board to do these benefits for the Alameda skate park. A couple of years in a row, I would go hit up Jake, and I would hit up Jimmy, and, you know, people that I knew, you know, Shrugi from Ace Trucks, you know, and hit up all the old homies and say, hey, can you guys fucking, you know, help us out? We're doing a benefit. And, you know, and they were always super awesome, you know, and they would always like help out and throw me a bunch of swag that we could give away and raffle off. And they would, you know, put it up on the Thrasher site, and, you know, Jimmy would throw it up on a deluxe site, you know. So I was able to get to see Jake, you know, and hang out with him a few times, which I'm glad about, you know, because I think the last time I had actually hung out with Jake before then had been it's probably like 10 years ago. And we were hanging out at Motorhead. I was sober, you know, at the time, and Jake was not sober, you know, and we were sitting talking, hanging out, and he's super fucked up, as Jake often was, you know, but I kind of turn and I'm talking to this woman, and I turn back, and Jake's pissed some guy off, you know, and all of a sudden they're fucking fighting, but Jake's way too fucked up, you know, and so this guy fucking has him down on the ground, you know, and I run over and I grab dude and I pull him up and I pull it back, and I'm like, you don't want to, I said, you need to leave Jake alone, and you do not want to fight me, you know, and the guy's like, okay, you know, and so he actually like, you know, so I had to like pick Jake up, you know. And so I'm glad that's not my last memory of Jake. I'm glad, you know, that we got to hang out and bullshit. And I saw him at a skate event down in the Lower Bottoms too. Oh yeah. That was one of the last times I saw him. Yeah, they got a DIY little skate park there now. Jake actually lived like 2 blocks from there with Ramona back in, like, with a vert ramp in a warehouse. Like, it's so weird. He lives like, dude, I used to live like 2 blocks right there. I was like, God damn. It's insane. He was my right hand man. Oh wow! So I'm heard. Yeah, you've heard and witnessed a lot of. It's cool because I have stories for days. Mostly stuff that would piss off the average person, but kind of just me and a skateboard. Like I'm working at Thrasher. I'm with Jake. This is insane. Like this is kind of rad. I know it sucks, but it's kind of rad. You know? No, it's fucking it's super rad. You know,
right. So, I mean, how long have you been sober for?
13 years.
13.
Yeah. So I had the first time I got sober after I'd been in prison for about 5 years. I got sober, and then I got out, and I stayed sober that time about 6 years, and then I fell off the wagon, and I was running amok again for about 8 years before before I was able to get sober again. And I'm very lucky I was able to come back. I'm very lucky I didn't end up back in prison. I mean, because I should have, you know, I went straight back to crime, and I definitely should have gone back to prison, but I got real lucky. You know,
is there something that, I don't know, this is always a tough question, but I've been sober 5 years, and mine is alcohol. you know, a lot of friends have been dealing with addiction problems and all that stuff. And I'm always curious to people that are successfully staying sober. Is there something like when you came out and you had 8 years of like falling off again, was there something that like you grabbed onto that like, I mean, a lot of people say rock bottom, which I don't think is always true. I think a lot of times you don't have to hit rock bottom to be successful. I'm just wondering, is there some method to the madness? Like, you know, your self-destructive urges, how do you fight them and stay the course? You know what I mean? I know that's a huge question.
Yeah. And it's weird because, you know, you talk about hitting rock bottom. When I finally like made the decision, it's like, I'm going to try and get sober, trying to get clean. It wasn't like, I'd had way worse days, you know? So I don't know.
I mean, the first time you're kind of forced into it because you're in prison, like you pretty much have to.
That was actually, I mean, when I was in prison, I was shooting dope. I was drinking Pruno. I was running dope on the yard. So that's not the case. I was getting loaded for the first 5 years of my prison term.
Wow.
It wasn't till I had like a moment of clarity 5 years in that was like a game changer, you know, and that was a real aha moment. You know, I was on my first conjugal visit. I'd gotten married to this woman. It took a long time to get married. Like I spent a bunch of time in the hole, you know, so we got together after I'd been down for about a year, but it took me, I was down for 5 years before I got a conjugal visit. It took a long time and a bunch of shit to actually get a conjugal visit. But it's my first conjugal visit. I'm sitting in this little apartment. I'd been transferred. I dropped points. I went from a level 4 prison to a level 3 prison. And I'm sitting in this apartment with my wife, you know, super institutionalized. Really, in my mind at that point, I never thought I was going to get out of prison. I had signed up for a lifetime of being on the yard, so to speak, you know, and I'm sitting there with my wife and I had this moment. I'm like, holy shit, like, I don't have to like spend the rest of my life on the yard. Like maybe I can do things differently, you know? And that was a huge game changer for me. You know, that was like a real aha moment that changed everything. And if I hadn't had that, I'd still be in prison, no doubt, you know, because I was very much involved in all kinds of fucked up shit in prison. You know, I just hadn't really been caught a whole lot, you know. Then I spent some time in the hole for trying to do punk rock. But as far as like dope, you know, running dope or violence or any of the other things that I'd been involved in there, I hadn't really, you know, gotten caught yet, you know. But I hadn't gotten caught yet, but I didn't care if I got caught. Like I'd signed up to live this lifestyle, you know, be in prison for the rest of my life in my mind, you know. And then I had this moment. But the second time, me and I had a crime partner. I was down in Texas, and we were doing armed robberies and we were doing collections. And this guy, you know, he'd been to prison in Texas before, and we were very bad. You know, sometimes you hang out with people and it just clicks in a really horrible way. And that was me and this guy. We were not good for each other. We were also not that successful as criminals because we had one gun between the two of us. And so we would often, unless we were doing collections, we would take turns. You know, one of us would take the gun and go hit a lick, you know. And so it was his turn to go pull a robbery because we were almost out of money. And he went out to go do an armed robbery and he got caught. And there was a woman down there that, you know, he called her from jail saying, hey, let Sammy know I got busted and da 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 da. And this woman came and she sat me down and she's like, you've got to get out of here. I was in Houston, Texas at the time. She's like, somebody's going to kill you or you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. You've got to get out of here. And I don't know what it was, because so many people had told me before, dude, you're fucking up, you know, where are you going? You know, you have kids, you know, what are you doing? And I don't know what it was, but I heard her. I was like, you know, and it was just like another aha moment, like, holy shit, you know? And so I ended up, it took a little while, but I ended up making my way back to California finally, you know, and then it was, and then I had to detox, you know, because I was a hardcore heroin addict. So Nikki Sicky from Sick Pleasure and the original singer for Verbal Abuse, him and this woman Janine, she's now dead, may she rest in peace, but they babysat me. She had a room in her house, and so I boarded up the windows in this room, and I put a deadbolt in the door, so you had to have a key to get out. And Nikki and this chick, you know, I mean, Nikki and I boarded up the windows together, but they locked me in that room for a month. And they would come in and change the bucket, you know, and I mean, it's not like I was really eating, but they would try and bring me water, because for me, if I get deep into my disease, the only way I can stop is if I get locked up. And so this time I just built the cell myself.
So heavy.
Yeah. But, you know, I love Nikki, you know, he definitely, you know, him and Janine, she passed away from breast cancer, but they you know, saved my life, you know.
Oh, that's amazing. Is he around, or he's in Texas? Where's Nikki?
Nikki's around. No, he lives, you know, Verbal Abuse still plays. It's funny because, you know,
I got to interview the Chavez brothers for sure.
I think that they just did a documentary about the Chavez brothers.
Really?
Yeah.
With their ramp and everything?
Yeah, you know, it was like so awesome. Yeah, I haven't seen it yet, but I heard that there, and there should be. I mean, you know, that whole family was so influential in the skate scene and in the music scene in the Bay Area, you know.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, Bay Area is just, for me, it's gold. Like anything that comes out of the Bay Area is just like, this has always been home for me. So I remember growing up seeing the guy drop out of his window into the ramp. I'm like, that's the guy. You know, it's so sick. What's stoking you out today? How many albums? You guys recorded an album or a couple?
We put out Rise Up. The vinyl came out in 2019. The CD came out a little before that. We just recorded a couple songs that are going to be on a split 7-inch, Fang and a band called Let It Bleed on Die Laughing Records. That 7-inch, at least for us, is a precursor to a new album that will hopefully come out in 2021. We're in the process of writing it now.
Okay.
And so
if somebody wanted to get into new Fang, what's the song that you want them to play first? Like, check this out.
Well, we just recorded a song called Minneapolis, and it's about the police station being burned.
Fuck. Okay, so it's modern.
It's, you know, very much about trying to add our voice to, you know, many other voices, in just how pissed off we are about George Floyd, you know, and you know, the systemic racism that goes on in the country. So that song, we did a music video of it. It's called Minneapolis. It's on YouTube. Fang back in the early 80s was very much not a political band, but our last album, Rise Up, and then the direction we're going, I'm more pissed off now than I was 40 years ago, as far as the hypocrisy and just how fucked up this country still is.
Yeah.
So
you can't even write. These aren't even movies. Like you can't. It's in.
No, you can't even write that shit. Yeah. It's like the most ridiculous thing ever. It's mind blowing. Fucking mind blowing.
Would you ever have like some guests on? Do you ever think about, on my next album, I'd like to have Nikki do a song with me, or like, I don't know, Jello Biafra or somebody like from the olden days, like, or is it like, no, that's not our thing. We're just Fang and we're sticking to our thing.
I do I ever want to have, I mean, I would definitely bring guys in, doing backup vocals, shit like that. I've never really thought about doing like bringing in other people. It's so hard as it is. Like, it took us a long time to write our last record, and
what's your process? Are you guys sending, like, is the guitarist sending digital files to people? Like, how's that?
We do some of that, together? And then I come back to Oakland. I didn't go back last month because COVID was so bad, right around. But I've been trying to come out once a month. And then we spend like 2 or 3 days in the studio writing, and then we'll work on stuff, by ourselves, and then come together and try and write. But we have about 5 new songs, and I'd like to get at least 12 or 14, together before we go into the studio and make a new record. And it'll be on Die Laughing Records too. They've been a great label for us. It's a lot harder now. I live in Tucson, and one of our guitar players lives in Monterrey, Mexico.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. So that makes it definitely more challenging.
Right. I mean, getting the chemistry would be hard, but at least you can still email each other to get riffs and figure out, like, oh, I like that. What about this? And play off that stuff. I mean, those are some of the advantages of modern technology that sometimes we despise,
Right. No, it's kind of, and we probably don't take advantage of it as much as we could. I know people have written whole records and never sat in the same room with each other, like they'll be all, that's mind blowing. And we're not that technologically advanced, but we do definitely, like you said, like a guitar player will write a bunch of riffs, send them to all of us. What do you think about this? And we'll go back and forth. And then when we do all come together, we spend a lot of time, and all we're doing right now is working on writing new material. We don't practice, like our set or anything. We're just really trying to focus on getting new songs together,
Okay. Out of all the songs in the whole world, yours, other bands, anything, you could just put one on to send us off into the sunset. You want to just drop the needle and we'll play that song and get out of here. What would it be?
Wow. Boy, talk about being put on the spot. That is so hard. The first song that popped into my head was Mary Jane by Rick James. So I'm a huge Rick James fan, which is probably maybe bizarre, but that's the first song that popped into my head.
The last question I wanted to ask you is 2021. Thrasher has this thing called Mephisto Predicts. If you're Mephisto, what are you predicting? Like, what is going to happen this year? Are we going to get better? Are we going to stay the same? Are we going to get worse? Like, what are you thinking?
I'm still an optimist. So I actually predict that by the fall, definitely by the winter, things are going to be, back close to normal. As far as, for me, live music obviously is very important. We haven't played a show in a long time, but I'm assuming that, by the summer, I think that the vaccine, enough people start getting vaccinated where it will start to be safe to have, people go out to clubs again. But, if I really want to be optimistic, we'll be on tour somewhere, by the late fall of 2021, So
I like the way that sounds. Well, hopefully you guys will come through the Bay Area and play a couple of shows, either East Bay, West Bay, or both.
I'm sure that'll probably be the first place we play. Once it's once we're not putting a bunch of people at risk. It's gonna.
No, absolutely.
That's I think everybody just needs to hunker down and kind of wait it out.
Any shout outs you want to plug, anything like that you're doing or people that have helped you along the way or any of that stuff?
Oh, there's a lot of people that helped me along the way, and I yeah. So, but they for the most part know who they are. As far as plugs, we have a 7-inch coming out. Go check out the new video of Minneapolis that just popped. We just dropped that.
I'll embed it in on the page with the interview.
Okay, yeah. It was edited. The video was edited by my girlfriend, Annalisa Cheshire. She did an amazing job at her videography. So I'll give a shout out to her.
Okay.
And look for a record next year, and keep playing punk rock, keep skating.
All right. And I want to give a shout out to Eben Sterling, who kind of connected the dots and put you in touch with me or me in touch with you. And I'm stoked to have got this. Also, I do have to mention for the 100th time, thank you so much. Fucking, you probably no doubt have the most time being interviewed by me because we had to do it twice. So I really appreciate you taking the time. I really do.
No, it's been good, and I love Evan. That dude's he's super awesome.
Haven't seen him since March 14th.
I've seen him, I think, since March 14th, maybe.
Yeah. Been working from home since then. It's crazy.
Wow.
It's almost a year. I'm like, this is nuts.
Yeah, no, I love that guy. Evan's the shit. Thanks for having me on again.
Yeah, thank you, man. Take care. Be safe.
All right, bro. Take care.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Talkin Schmit. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, Anchor, Spotify, or anywhere you get your podcasts. When you subscribe, you'll get notifications every Tuesday of new episodes the minute they become available. Also, please leave reviews and a 5-star rating. It's the best way to help the show grow. All of the episodes will always remain free, but if you would like to help support the show, you can do so at talkingschmit.com, where you can pick up some merchandise like t-shirts, beanies, hats, and stickers. The website has an entire archive of all of the episodes, with extra photos and videos. Email us with any suggestions, comments, or ways that the show may have improved your life at talkingschmit@gmail.com. All interviews are conducted, edited, and produced by Schmitty. The intro music is Mary's Cross by the band Nature. Very special shout out goes to the executive director, Sharal Camisa.
Shout out.
Love it!
This is Talkin Schmit, where the Rolodex is deep, but the conversation is deeper.